The wind hit like a hammer made of ice and rage. David Grant kept his head down as he pushed through the blizzard, each step harder than the last. His construction mech groaned under the strain, servos fighting against the frozen air that wanted to lock them solid. The temperature gauge on his helmet display kept dropping, numbers that would kill most species in seconds that he had come out here for equipment. Stupid, expensive drilling heads that corporate refused to replace because the storm forecast said they had time. The forecast was wrong. The storm had rolled in 3 hours early, and now David was half a mile from the human habitat, with visibility down to nothing and the wind trying to shove him off the ice shelf. Something caught his eye. A reflection where there shouldn't be one. David stopped, turned his helmet lights toward the anomaly. Through the driving snow, he saw shapes. Big ones, partially buried in the drifts near an old survey marker that nobody had visited in months. His first thought was mineral deposits. Frosthaven was supposed to be rich in rare elements, which was why the colony existed at all. But minerals didn't have that kind of symmetry. Minerals didn't look like they were arranged in a protective circle. David moved closer, his curiosity overriding the screaming instinct to get back to shelter. The shapes resolved into creatures. 3 of them. Huge, scaled beings with wings folded tight against their bodies. 2 large ones curled around a smaller one in the middle. Ice crystals had formed across their scales, making them glitter like jeweled statues in his lights. They were beautiful. They were also dying, if they weren't already dead. "Grant, where are you?" The voice crackled in his helmet. Rachel, the security chief, sounded worried. "You need to get back now. This storm is accelerating." David reached out with the mech's manipulator arm, brushing snow away from the closest creature's face. Its scales were deep blue, shading to silver at the edges. Its eyes were closed. He couldn't tell if it was breathing. "Grant, respond." "I found something," David said. 3 large creatures. Unknown species. They're freezing to death out here." There was a pause. Then a different voice came through, clipped and annoyed. Administrator Brell, the Quilvan who ran the colony with the warmth of a tax audit. "Construction Foreman Grant, you are ordered to return immediately. Unknown biological specimens require quarantine protocols. You are not authorized to make contact." David looked at the 3 creatures. The way the 2 larger ones had positioned themselves, wings spread to shelter the smaller one between them. The way their bodies curved together despite the cold trying to tear them apart. He had seen that kind of desperate protection before. Parents trying to save their child. "They'll die if I leave them," David said. "That is not your concern," Brell replied. "Colonial regulations are clear. Return to base immediately. That is a direct order." David thought about regulations. He thought about the stack of corporate memos that valued equipment over people, profits over lives. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth, and how he would want someone to help her if she was dying alone in the cold. "Negative," David said. He started up the mech's industrial heaters, the ones meant for thawing frozen equipment. "I'm bringing them in. Foreman Grant, you're in violation of multiple protocols. Cease immediately or face criminal charges." David ignored the voice and focused on the creatures. The mech wasn't designed for rescue work, but it had a cargo bay meant for hauling materials. He worked carefully, using the manipulator arms to lift each frozen body. They were heavy, dense with muscle under those scales. The smaller one made a sound as he moved it, a weak whimper that made his chest tight. They were alive. Barely, but alive. "You are making a mistake." Brell's voice had gone cold. "You will lose your position. You will face legal action. Earth's contract with this colony will be reviewed." David loaded the 3rd creature into the cargo bay and sealed it. The mech's heaters were running at maximum now, pumping warmth into the enclosed space. He started the long walk back to the habitat, leaning into the wind. "Maybe," David said, "but I'll be able to sleep tonight." The colony complex appeared through the snow like a cluster of geometric shapes fighting against the chaos of nature. Different sections for different species, each habitat tailored to specific atmospheric and temperature requirements. The Quilvan section ran cool and dry. The Hask section had heavy gravity and thick air. The Trill section was mostly water. The human section ran hot. uncomfortable for most species, but perfect for creatures pulled from frozen hell. David headed for the main human workshop, the largest open space in their habitat. Behind him, on the radio, he could hear Brell organizing a response. Security protocols, containment procedures, threats of sanctions and criminal prosecution that he thought about turning back, about following orders, about the safe, smart choice that wouldn't risk his career or Earth's fragile position in the galactic community. Then he thought about 3 frozen bodies curled together against the dark, and he kept walking. The outer airlock of the human habitat loomed ahead. David's crew would be inside, probably watching this whole thing unfold on their monitors. They would have heard Brell's threats. They would know what helping him could cost. The airlock door stayed closed. For a long moment, David thought they had locked him out, that he would have to stand here with 3 dying aliens while bureaucracy decided their fate. Then the door opened. Rachel stood there, suited up, her dark eyes unreadable behind her helmet visor. "You're an idiot," she said. "I know. This is going to cause so many problems. I know." Rachel stepped aside. Behind her, the rest of the human crew was already moving equipment, clearing space, setting up heaters and medical scanners. They had chosen sides. "Get them inside," Rachel said. "Fast." Brell is sending drones. David moved the mech through the airlock, feeling the burst of pressure equalization, hearing the hiss of atmospheric processing. The inner door opened into the workshop, and the heat hit him like a wall of salvation. His crew swarmed the mech, helping unload the 3 frozen creatures on a heated mats. They worked with the efficient desperation of people who knew time was everything. Thermal blankets appeared. Medical scanners began their sweeps. Someone started in 4-line, pumping warmed fluids. David climbed out of the mech and pulled off his helmet. His hands were shaking, and not from the cold. Rachel was at his elbow, watching the creatures with a professional eye. "What are they?" "I don't know," David admitted. "But they're a family. I'm sure of that." On the monitors mounted around the workshop, Administrator Brell's face appeared, multiplied across every screen. The Quilvin's features were composed, but there was something dangerous in those 2 calm eyes. "This is your final warning," Brell said. The workshop had become a makeshift medical bay, filled with the hum of equipment never meant for this purpose. David watched the scanner readings scroll across portable monitors while his crew worked around the 3 massive forms laid out on heated mats. The ice crystals were melting, water pooling on the floor, steam rising in the warm air of the human habitat. "Core temperature is rising on the small one," called out Pete, one of the welders who had somehow become their medic by default. 78 degrees and climbing. Rachel paced near the door, her rifle held ready but pointed down. Through the workshop's reinforced windows, they could see security drones gathering outside. Small, floating machines with cameras and weapons that looked too efficient. Administrator Brell wasn't bluffing about containment. "How long until they wake up?" Rachel asked. "Could be hours. Could be never." Pete didn't look up from his scanners. "I'm a welder, not a doctor. I don't even know what normal is for these things." The smallest creature stirred, just a twitch of its wing, but everyone in the room froze. David moved closer, slowly, hands visible and empty. The creature's scales were shifting color as it warmed, the blue deepening, the silver edges starting to gleam like polished metal. Its eyes opened. Vertical pupils, bright gold, contracting against the workshop lights. The creature made a sound, something between a chirp and a growl, and tried to move. Its limbs wouldn't cooperate yet, still sluggish from the cold. "Easy," David said, his voice low. "You're safe. We're not going to hurt you." The creature's head swiveled toward him, those gold eyes focusing with startling intelligence. It made another sound, more distressed this time, and looked toward the 2 larger forms still unconscious nearby. "Your parents," David said, guessing but feeling certain. "They're alive. We're helping them." Whether it understood his words or just his tone, the creature seemed to calm slightly. Its breathing steadied, steam puffing from its nostrils in small clouds. It watched David with an intensity that made him feel measured, evaluated. Rachel's radio crackled. Human Security Chief Okonkwo. This is Administrator Brell. I am convening an emergency colony council meeting in 1 hour. The unauthorized biologicals must be transferred to quarantine before that meeting, or I will authorize the drones to use force. Rachel Keeter-Mike, the creatures are still critical. Moving them could kill them. That is no longer your decision to make. Brell's voice carried the satisfaction of someone playing a winning hand. You have 1 hour. The radio went dead. Rachel looked at David, her expression grim. He's not going to back down. Neither am I. One of the larger creatures twitched. Then the other. Their eyes opened simultaneously, those same gold pupils, but larger, more aware. They took in the workshop, the humans moving around them, the equipment and lights. Their heads turned toward the smallest creature, who made a soft sound. The response was immediate. Both larger creatures tried to rise, their movements jerky but purposeful. David's crew backed away fast, giving them space. The dragons were massive up close, easily 12 feet long with wingspans that had to be 20 feet when fully extended. Steady, David said, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to his crew or the creatures. Nobody's threatening your kid. Look, he pointed to the small one, wrapped in thermal blankets, within 4-line running fluids. The little dragon made another sound, something that carried a different tone, almost reassuring. The two adults stopped their aggressive posturing. They moved closer to their offspring, sniffing, making low rumbling sounds that vibrated in David's chest. After a long moment, they settled down beside the small one, their bodies forming a protective barrier, but their eyes never left the humans. Water, David said. He filled a metal container and placed it within reach of the creatures, then backed away. Food too. Get some of the protein rations. His crew moved carefully, setting out supplies and backing off. The dragons watched every movement with tactical precision. Finally, the smaller one stretched its neck and drank, making a satisfied sound. The adults followed, though they drank without taking their eyes off the humans. Hours passed in tense peace. The dragons grew stronger, their movements more coordinated. The small one started exploring its surroundings, sniffing at equipment and making curious sounds. One of the adults always kept watch while the other rested, a rotation that spoke to exhaustion and trauma. David sat on a workbench, maintaining distance but staying visible. He talked occasionally, nonsense mostly, just keeping his voice calm and steady. The dragons listened, their heads tilting at certain words. Rachel returned from the council meeting looking like she had aged a year. It's bad. The Quilven want them expelled. The Hask want them destroyed as potential predators. The Trill are abstaining, which means they agree but won't say it out loud. And the humans? We're voting to protect them. But we're outnumbered 3-1, and Brell has colonial authority on his side. Rachel sat down heavily. He gave us an ultimatum. Remove the creatures by morning, or he'll seal the human section and cut life support until we comply. He can't do that. That's attempted murder. He's calling it safety protocols, protecting the colony from unknown biological threats. Rachel's jaw clenched. The other species are backing him because they're scared. Scared of what these creatures are, scared of what it means that humans would risk everything for aliens we just met. David looked at the dragons. The small one had fallen asleep between its parents, who watched over it with obvious devotion. They had been dying in the ice, and now they were here, alive, because people had chosen compassion over convenience. There's something else, Rachel said quietly. I did some checking on the colony's mining operations. The official reports don't match the actual excavation patterns. We're not just mining for minerals, David. We're digging something up, something big, and something that somebody doesn't want found. Before David could respond, the facility shook. A deep vibration that came from below, from the depths of Frosthaven's ice. Equipment rattled. The dragons came alert instantly, their bodies tensed out on every monitor in the workshop. Administrator Brell's face appeared. But the usual bureaucratic mask was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Construction Foreman Grant, Brell said. Your actions have triggered a situation that requires immediate containment. For the safety of this colony, I am authorizing emergency protocols. You have 30 minutes to surrender the biological specimens. After that, armed drones will enter the human section with authorization to use lethal force. This is not negotiable. The screens went dark. In the silence that followed, David heard the sound of weapons charging outside the workshop doors. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the sealed human section. Security drones were working through the reinforced doors, their progress marked by glowing lines of molten metal. David's crew had maybe 15 minutes before the drones broke through. "Barricade the inner doors," Rachel ordered, her voice steady despite the situation. "Stack anything heavy. Welding equipment, tool crates, whatever we have." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, hauling equipment into defensive positions. They were construction workers, not soldiers, but they knew how to build barriers that could take a beating. The dragons watched the preparations with clear understanding, their golden eyes tracking every movement. David sat at his work terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. His construction access gave him deep system privileges, authorization to monitor structural integrity across the entire colony. He had used that access hundreds of times for legitimate purposes. Now he was using it to dig into places he wasn't supposed to see. "What are you looking for?" Rachel asked, glancing over his shoulder between issuing orders. "Answers. Why Brel is willing to kill humans over 3 aliens we pulled from the ice." David pulled up excavation records, mining reports, power consumption data, and why the colony is using 10 times more power than official operations should require. The numbers told a story that made his stomach turn. The mining operation was a cover. The real work was happening far below the official dig sites, in chambers that didn't appear on any public map. Power was being routed to massive heating and stasis systems. Life support for something. Or someone. "Look at this." David brought up a structural scan from 6 months ago, one of thousands he had filed for safety reviews. At the time, he had noted some unusual density readings in the deep ice and marked them for follow-up. Nobody had ever followed up. Now he knew why. The skin showed shapes. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All roughly the same size as the dragons currently sheltering in his workshop. All suspended in the ice at temperatures and pressures that would preserve them indefinitely. "They're not unique," David whispered. "The dragons. There are more of them down there. A lot more." Rachel leaned closer, her expression hardening as she understood. A graveyard or a prison. The facility shook again, harder this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. The dragons became agitated, the adults making deep rumbling sounds that vibrated through the floor. The small one pressed against its parents, wings folded tight. David pulled up more files, following the trail of authorization codes and classified access logs. What he found made him want to throw up. The colony wasn't just mining Frosthaven. They were harvesting something from the frozen dragons below. Neural tissue, biological material. The reports were coded in technical language, but the meaning was clear. "They're using them," David said. "The dragons below. Their bodies, their brains, something for technology, for ships." Rachel grabbed his shoulder hard. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" David turned to face her. "Faster than light travel. Every ship in the galaxy uses it. But nobody talks about how it works. Not really. What if the secret isn't physics? What if it's biological?" The largest of the dragons moved closer. It had been watching David work, those intelligent eyes focused on the screens. Now it made a sound, something urgent, and pressed its snout against the terminal. The screen flickered. "Easy," David said. "I don't know if you understand any of this." The dragon made another sound and tapped the screen with one claw, surprisingly gentle. The scan image showing the frozen shapes below zoomed in. The dragon tapped again, more insistent. "You recognize them," David said. "You know what they are." The dragon's eyes met his, and David saw something there that transcended species. Grief, anger, desperation. Pete called out from the barricade. "They're through the outer door. 2 minutes, maybe less." Rachel started securing her rifle, checking ammunition. The rest of the crew was doing the same, grabbing whatever could serve as weapons. They all knew this was crazy, that resisting armed drones was a death sentence for their careers, if not their lives. None of them moved toward the creatures they were protecting. David made a decision. He keyed his terminal to broadcast mode, linked it to every communication channel he could access, including the emergency transponders that would relay to passing ships and distant colonies. If they were going to die, the truth would die with them unless he acted now. This is Construction Foreman David Grant, Human Contingent, Colony 17, Frosthaven. I am transmitting evidence of illegal biological exploitation, unauthorized species imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit murder to cover up these crimes. Administrator Brell and the Colony Council are attempting to kill human workers to prevent this information from reaching the wider galaxy. These files contain proof. He uploaded everything: scans, power records, classified reports, his own testimony. The data stream would take minutes to fully transmit, and they didn't have minutes that Brell's voice came over the speakers, tight with rage. You have just signed Earth's expulsion from the galactic community, Foreman Grant. No species will trust humanity after this betrayal. Betrayal? David shot back. You're the ones running a secret prison camp, using sentient beings as spare parts. We're just trying to save lives. Those lives are not yours to save. This facility serves a purpose beyond your comprehension. The technology derived here powers civilization itself. You would destroy galactic stability for 3 animals. The dragons reacted to Brell's words, a unified snarl that showed far too many teeth. The smallest one stood up, shaky but determined, positioning itself between the humans and the door where the drones were cutting through. They're not animals, David said. And even if they were, that wouldn't make it right. The inner door exploded inward. Security drones poured through the gap, weapons ready, scanners sweeping. Rachel's crew opened fire with improvised weapons. Tools and cutting torches turned into instruments of resistance. The dragons moved. The 2 adults positioned themselves as shields, their scale bodies taking hits meant for humans. The small one breathed out, and David saw fire for the first time, a gout of flame that melted a drone in midair. But there were too many drones. Too many weapons. The barricade was falling apart under sustained fire. Then the facility shook again, massive and violent. This wasn't a tremor. This was something breaking free. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep below, alarms started screaming on the monitors. Past Brell's face frozen in shock, David saw it. The deep excavation site. The ice was cracking. The shapes were moving. The imprisoned dragons below were waking up, and they were angry. The security drones stopped their assault and retreated, responding to some emergency protocol that overrode their attack orders. Through the shattered doorway, David could hear chaos echoing through the colony. Alarms shrieked from every section. Automated systems were shouting evacuation warnings in 6 different languages. Rachel lowered her weapon, breathing hard. Her crew was battered but alive, protected by the dragons who had taken the worst of the weapon's fire. The scales on the 2 adults showed scorch marks and impact craters, but they were standing, watchful, ready for the next threat. What just happened? Pete asked, pressing a hand to a cut on his forehead. David was still at his terminal, watching the security feeds that Administrator Brell had forgotten to lock down in the panic. The screen showed nightmare scenarios playing out across the colony. In the deep excavation levels, ice was shattering. Massive forms were breaking through stasis fields that had held them for years, maybe centuries. The imprisoned dragons were waking up, and the facility's automated defenses were completely unprepared for it. They're free, David said. The ones below. Something triggered their stasis systems to fail. He looked at the dragon family in the workshop. The small one was pressed against its parents, making soft sounds. The adults were staring at the monitors, at the images of their kind emerging from the ice with violence and confusion. Can we help them? Rachel asked. I don't know if they want our help. David pulled up the facility map. They've been prisoners. For how long? We don't know. What do you think they're going to do when they see aliens with weapons? The question was answered seconds later when a security feed showed a Quilvangard team trying to contain a newly awakened dragon. The dragon, disoriented and aggressive, tore through them like paper. It wasn't trying to kill, David realized. It was trying to escape. But the result was the same. This is going to be a massacre, Rachel said quietly. For everyone. David made his decision. We need to go down there. Are you insane? Probably. David turned to the dragons in the workshop. The adults were watching him with those two intelligent eyes. But we're the only ones who have a chance. We save these three. Maybe they can convince the others we're not all enemies. It was Rachel's turn to make a choice. She could follow orders, evacuate with the other colonists, and let this situation burn itself out. Or she could follow a crazy construction foreman into a disaster zone on the hope that compassion might overcome fear. She checked her rifle and nodded. We'll need a path to the excavation levels. And we'll need them. She gestured to the dragons. The small dragon approached David, its movements more confident now. It made a sound, something that carried a questioning tone, and touched his hand with its snout. The scales were warm, smooth like polished stone. David felt the creature's breath on his skin, saw his own reflection in those golden eyes. We need your help, David said. Your people down there, they're scared and angry. Can you talk to them? Make them understand that not all of us are the enemy. The small dragon tilted its head, then turned to its parents. They exchanged sounds that David's translator couldn't parse, a language more complex than simple animal communication. After a moment, the two adults stood and moved to the shattered doorway. They looked back at David, waiting. I think that's a yes, Pete said. David grabbed emergency gear and a portable terminal. Rachel assembled a small team, volunteers who understood they might not come back. The rest of the crew would head for the evacuation shuttles and try to get off Frosthaven before the whole facility collapsed. The journey through the colony was surreal. They passed through sections in chaos, automated systems fighting against catastrophic failures, and corridors filled with fleeing personnel. Some species ignored the humans entirely, too focused on escape. Others tried to stop them, demanding explanations or threatening arrest. The dragons made those confrontations short. Nothing wanted to argue with three massive, fire-breathing creatures moving with clear purpose. They reached the service elevator that led to the deep excavation levels. The shaft descended for hundreds of meters through layers of ice and rock, ending at a facility that officially didn't exist. The doors opened on a scene of devastation. The excavation chamber was enormous, carved from ancient ice and reinforced with technology meant to last forever. Stasis pods lined the walls in rows, hundreds of them, each containing a frozen dragon. Most of the pods were dark now. Their occupants already escaped. The ice floor was covered in water, blood, and bodies. Some were dragons, barely awake and already killed by automated defenses. Others were colony personnel who had been working down here in secret. In the center of the chamber, a group of awakened dragons had gathered. They were in bad shape, weak from long imprisonment, confused and terrified. Some were trying to help others still trapped in failing pods. Others were tearing apart equipment in rage and fear. When David's group emerged from the elevator, every dragon head turned toward them. The chamber went silent except for the dripping of melting ice and the hum of dying machinery. The small dragon from the workshop stepped forward. It made a sound, something that carried across the chamber like a song. The awakened dragons listened, their aggressive postures softening slightly. The small one continued, gesturing with its wings toward David and the other humans. One of the awakened dragons, larger than the others and covered in scars that looked decades old, approached slowly. Its eyes were hard, full of pain that had calcified into hatred. It stopped in front of David, close enough that he could feel its breath, hot and smelling of sulfur. The small dragon moved between them, still making those sounds, urgent and pleading. The scar dragon looked down at the youngster, then at the two adults who had moved to stand beside David. It made a sound like grinding stones. The largest dragon in the workshop, the one David thought of as Hope, stepped forward. She made a deep rumbling sound and did something that made David's breath catch. She placed her head against the scar dragon's shoulder in a gesture that needed no translation. Comfort, recognition, family finding family after too long apart. The scar dragon shuddered. Its eyes closed. When they opened again, some of the hatred had drained away, replaced by exhaustion and grief that IT turned to the other awakened dragons and made a sound. Not a command, a request. The dragons stopped their destruction and listened. Tell them, David said to the small dragon, that we want to help, that we want to free everyone. But we need to move fast. The facility is collapsing. As if to emphasize his words, the chamber shook again. Somewhere above, structure failed with a sound like thunder. The excavation chamber had become a race against time. David coordinated with Rachel and the awakened dragons, organizing a rescue operation that had no business working but somehow did. The humans operated machinery to break open stuck stasis pods while the dragons helped their weaker kin, supporting those who couldn't walk and calming those who woke up terrified. How many left? Rachel shouted over the sound of cracking ice and failing systems. David checked his portable terminal. 43 pods still occupied, but we've got maybe 20 minutes before this whole level collapses. The facility was tearing itself apart. Burrell had initiated the self-destruct sequence, but hadn't counted on the chaos, making it accelerate. Structural supports designed to last centuries were failing under the strain of hundreds of dragons breaking free simultaneously. The ancient ice beneath them was unstable, full of cracks that were spreading with every tremor. Pete and his team worked on the closest pods. Their welding equipment turned to rescue tools. Each pod they opened revealed another dragon, some conscious, others barely alive. The scar dragon that had nearly killed David was now working alongside the humans, using its strength to tear apart machinery that wouldn't yield to human tools. That a message came through on David's terminal. A Hask engineer named Oren, broadcasting on an emergency frequency. Any humans still alive down there? This is Oren from Maintenance Section 7. Some of us didn't agree with what Burrell was doing. We've been documenting everything. But you need to evacuate now. The evacuation shuttles are launching. You have 15 minutes, maybe less. We can't leave them, David replied. There are dozens still trapped. Then you're all going to die. Oren's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. And their deaths will mean nothing because Burrell will destroy all evidence. Nobody will know what happened here. Rachel grabbed David's arm. He's right. We've saved over 200. That's more than anyone thought possible. But if we stay, we lose everything. No witnesses. No proof. David looked around the chamber. Dragons working alongside humans, some carrying their injured fellows toward the elevators. The small dragon from the workshop, Frost, was helping comfort a juvenile even smaller than itself. Hope and Haven were coordinating with other adults, organizing the evacuation with a tactical precision that spoke to intelligence that matched or exceeded any species in the galaxy. We need transport, David said. The shuttles won't take dragons. They're not designed for it. The construction equipment, Rachel said, catching his thought. Your mechs, the cargo haulers, the mining transports. They're built for extreme conditions. And they're in the vehicle bay, 3 levels up. David pulled up the facility schematic. If we can reach them, we can load the dragons and get off this rock. Another tremor shook the chamber. A support column cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Ice rained from the ceiling. One of the awakened dragons roared a warning, and everyone scattered as a section of wall collapsed. Go, the scar dragon said. The human translator on David's terminal, struggling with the dragon's language, finally found enough context to begin working. The words came through stilted but clear. We handle this. You bring escape. David wanted to argue, but there was no time. He took Rachel and a small team toward the elevators, leaving Pete and others to coordinate with the dragons. The ride up was terrifying, the elevator shaft groaning and shifting around them. They emerged into chaos. The vehicle bay was a war zone. Some colony personnel were trying to steal transport for themselves. Others were following Burrell's orders to sabotage anything that could be used for escape. And through it all, automated security was still trying to enforce lockdown protocols. Rachel and her team cleared a path with a combination of authorization codes she wasn't supposed to have and the kind of aggressive persuasion that came from being very done with corporate regulations. David and his crew hotwire construction mechs, cargo haulers, and even a mining borer that moved like a mechanical dinosaur. This is insane, Pete said as he climbed into a hauler's cockpit. Half these vehicles aren't even rated for atmosphere. Then we'll fly them badly, David replied. They formed a convoy and headed back down. The elevators were failing, so they used the emergency ramps, driving construction equipment through corridors it was never meant to fit in. They bulldozed through obstacles and ignored warning lights that said the structures around them were about to fail. When they reached the excavation level again, the scene had deteriorated. More of the ceiling had collapsed. Water was pouring in from somewhere, mixing with melting ice to create a rising flood. The dragons were organized in groups, the stronger ones supporting the weaker, but there were still too many who couldn't move on their own. Load them up, David ordered. Every vehicle, maximum capacity. The dragons understood. They climbed into cargo bays designed for ore and equipment, packing in with a discipline that came from desperation. The humans helped, rigging safety lines and securing the weakest. The small dragons went into the heated cabins where they would be safest. Hope appeared at David's mech, looking up at him. The translator caught her meaning. Not all. Still inside. Cannot move. How many? 12. 2 hurt. 2 frozen. David looked at the crumbling chamber. The convoy was loaded. They could leave now, save the 200-plus dragons they had freed. Or they could try for 12 more and risk losing everything that he didn't even have to think about it. Where are they? Hope led him to the deepest part of the chamber, where the oldest pods were still active. Inside were dragons in critical condition, barely alive, sustained only by technology that was now failing. Moving them was almost certainly a death sentence. Leaving them was a certain one. "Help me get them out," David said. Rachel appeared beside him. Then Pete. Then Oren, the Hask engineer who had been broadcasting warnings. Other colony personnel who had been watching and waiting for someone to do the right thing. They worked together, multiple species united by something stronger than regulations or fear. They pulled dragons from dying pods and loaded them onto the last transport, working with the care of people handling family. The chamber gave its final warning. The ice beneath them cracked in a web pattern that spread like lightning. "Go," David shouted. "Everyone out. Now." The convoy rolled, driving up ramps that were collapsing behind them. Dragons roared encouragement. Humans pushed vehicles past their limits. The facility screamed around them, metal and ice tearing apart. They burst out of the underground complex into Frosthaven's frozen surface just as the excavation levels collapsed. The sound was like a world ending, a roar that shook the ground and sent up a cloud of ice and debris that blocked out the stars. David's mech skidded to a stop. He counted vehicles, did a frantic inventory of his convoy. Everyone had made it out. Every dragon, every human who had stayed to help. In orbit above, the evacuation shuttles were gathering. They saw the convoy emerging from the disaster zone. Some ships turned away, following Brell's orders to leave witnesses behind. Others, against all protocol, descended to help. 6 months after Frosthaven collapsed into itself, David Grant stood at the viewport of a station that shouldn't exist yet. The construction was ahead of schedule, powered by a cooperation that had seemed impossible half a year ago. Outside, ships moved in patterns both familiar and strange, guided by navigation systems that worked on partnership instead of exploitation. The fallout from Colony 17 had been massive. The evidence David and Rachel transmitted before the facility's destruction had spread across the galactic network faster than any government could suppress it. Images of frozen dragons in stasis pods, records of neural harvesting operations, testimony from workers who had been threatened into silence. The revelation that faster-than-light travel depended on the imprisonment and exploitation of sentient beings had shaken galactic civilization to its core. Some governments tried to justify it as necessary, as the price of progress. Those governments were now facing internal collapse as their populations demanded something better. Earth, the newest member of the galactic community, had found itself at the center of everything. Human diplomats, overwhelmed and underprepared, had made a simple statement that resonated across 1,000 worlds. If civilization required slavery, then civilization needed to change, regardless of the cost. "You look thoughtful," Rachel appeared at his elbow, carrying 2 containers of coffee from the station's commissary. Regretting your choices? Every day, David admitted, taking the coffee. And I'd make the same ones again. Below them, in the station's main bay, dragons were working alongside humans, Hask, Trill, and even some Quilven who had broken with their government. The species that called themselves Dracor were teaching others their gift, the ability to sense and navigate quantum pathways. It was knowledge they gave freely, asking only for freedom and safety in return. The process was slower than the old system. Ships took longer to make jumps. Trade routes had to be recalculated. Some planets faced shortages as the galaxy adjusted to a new reality. But there was no more harvesting, no more imprisonment. The cost was measured in time and inconvenience, not in enslaved lives. Hope wants to see you, Rachel said. She's in the council chambers. David made his way through the station, noting the changes that 6 months had brought. What had started as a refugee camp had evolved into something new. A place where species that had been kept deliberately separated were learning to work together. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still prejudices, still people who wanted the old system back, but it was honest. And sometimes that was enough. Hope waited for him in a room designed to accommodate multiple species comfortably. She had grown in the months since Frost Haven, her scales brighter, her movements more confident. Haven was with her, and Frost, who was now nearly adult-sized and spoke better English than some humans David knew. Foreman Grant, Frost said, the title turned into something like affection. We have news from the search teams. Another facility? David asked. They had found 3 more hidden sites like Frost Haven, each one a prison disguised as a research station. Each one was being shut down, its prisoners freed. No, Hope spoke, her voice carrying the deep resonance that all Dracor had. Something better. We found home. She activated a display, showing a planet David didn't recognize. It was beautiful in a harsh way, with vast oceans and continents covered in mountain ranges that looked like frozen waves. This is where Dracor come from, Haven explained. We thought it was lost, but the old navigation paths remember. It has been waiting. That's incredible, David said. Will you go back? Some will, Frost said, but not all. Some of us were born in chains. We have never seen home. This place, this station, working with you and others who chose freedom. This is home now, too. Hope moved closer to David, her head lowering to his level. You asked us once to help, to speak for humans who saved us. We have spoken. The galaxy knows what humans did, what you did, but won't do more. More how? Stay with you, Hope said. Build this new way together. Dracor and humans, both new to the wider galaxy, both trying to be better than what came before. We could learn from each other. David felt something tight in his chest loosen. He had saved 3 lives on an ice world, acted on instinct and compassion without thinking about consequences. Those consequences had included death threats, criminal charges that were still pending, and the collapse of a system that had existed for thousands of years. But they had also included this: a room where different species talked as equals. A galaxy slowly, painfully learning to build something better. 300 Dracor who would have died in ice, now alive and free. I like that, David said that a chime sounded. Rachel's voice came through the station intercom. David, we have incoming ships. Earth Diplomatic Corps finally arrived. They want to talk about your status and probably yell at you for a few hours about proper channels and protocol. David sighed. I should go deal with that. Wait. Frost moved to a storage cabinet and retrieved something wrapped in cloth. We made this. For you. David unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a scale, one of Hope's from the looks of it, mounted on a simple metal base. Inscribed in both English and Dracor script was a phrase. Rachel had taught him enough of their language to read it. First warmth in the cold. When you are tired, Haven said, when people tell you that you chose wrong, that you caused too much trouble for 3 lives, remember, you did not save 3. You freed hundreds. You changed everything. And it started because you saw a family freezing and could not walk away. David held the scale, feeling its weight. Outside the viewport, Ships moved through space using navigation provided by free Dracor who helped because they chose to, not because they were forced. On the station, humans and aliens worked together building something new. IT wasn't easy. The galaxy was still adjusting, still angry, still scared. Earth faced sanctions and restrictions from species that resented humanity's role in appending their comfortable exploitation. David himself would probably never be allowed to leave this station without facing arrest on a dozen worlds. But none of that mattered as much as the memory of 3 frozen bodies in the snow and the choice to offer warmth instead of walking away. "I should get to that meeting," David said. "But after, if you have time, I'd like to hear about your homeworld. And maybe share some stories about Earth." "We would like that," Hope said. David left the council chamber carrying the scale, heading toward another meeting full of regulations and consequences. Behind him, 3 Dracor who should have died in the ice discussed plans for a future that shouldn't have been possible. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy one. Sometimes doing good meant breaking rules, losing safety, risking everything for people you just met. But David had learned something on Frosthaven that he would never forget. The warmth you give away is the only warmth that really matters. Everything else is just weather.